Hello fun people, I'm Isaac Carlson, and today I want to discuss the canceled plans for Monsters Inc. 2, because while getting excited for the Monsters Inc. sequel series, Monsters at Work, I stumbled on a planned continuation of the original story. In a discussion made by the YouTuber Disney Daily, I was introduced to the fact that there was going to be a sequel made where Mike and Sully reunited with Boo. But of course, those plans were inevitably scrapped, and the reason wasn't because the story didn't work, was low quality, or there were other projects that Pixar needed to focus on. Monsters Inc. 2 was thrown out because it wasn't being made by Pixar. You see, early on in Pixar's life, after George Lucas sold the company to Steve Jobs, Pixar was able to enter a deal with the Walt Disney Company where they would produce 3 feature films that would be distributed to the public by Disney. After the massive critical and financial success of Toy Story though, that lineup of films was expanded to 7 films, but in the negotiations to extend their collaboration, Disney was able to take control over any sequels that would be produced based on the films Pixar created, and had the sole rights to produce consumer products, meaning Disney would be able to do whatever they wanted with Pixar's characters, regardless of whether Pixar and Disney continued to work together. Pixar had a short-term victory in getting to receive funding to create more films, but they were backed into a corner when their contract was going to expire after the release of Cars in 2006. In 2005, Steve Jobs was through dealing with the Walt Disney Company's CEO, Michael Eisner. Both men were extremely passionate, ego-driven, and bullheaded, so they had been clashing often as they battled to maintain dominance in their negotiations to extend Disney and Pixar's deal. To attempt to gain leverage over Pixar and submit to Disney's demands, Eisner even went to the extent of establishing a new animation studio called Circle 7, which was intended to specialize in computer animation and was supposed to create sequels to the Disney-owned Pixar properties. This division of Walt Disney Feature Animation would get the oh-so-loving name PixArt, but nevertheless, executives instructed the studio to begin developing Toy Story 3, Finding Nemo 2, and of course, Monsters Inc. 2. Let me know if you'd like to hear about those other Pixar sequels down in the comments, but as for the Monsters Inc. sequel, Lost in Scaradise, that was given to the creative talent of Bob Hilgenberg and Rob Meir, and they decided to not go in the direction of a prequel. Instead, they hoped to move the story forward with Mike and Sully and even Boo. The sequel would begin a year after Boo's door was finished being repaired, only now the door was put into an archive area. With Sully longing to connect again with Boo, Mike sets up a visit for them on Boo's birthday, but when they went through her door, they didn't find their friend. They were shocked to find a snoring old woman in the room, leading to them thinking she must have moved away. Although Mike and Sully would disagree on how they should find Boo's new home, they eventually decide to go their separate ways into the human world in search of her. Through their adventures though, Mike and Sully would learn that the doors from the monster world weren't connected to specific closets, but instead they were gateways to particular people. And because time moved faster in Boo's world, they came to the realization that the elderly woman they found was Boo. In the end, the two monsters would have returned to the house they began at to bring their present to Boo, who was actually close to dying. But before she passed, she would have gotten to see and recognize her monster friends one last time. Now, this seems like a really fascinating way of continuing the original story of Monsters Inc., at least with the overarching story that was being set up. There definitely would have been a lot of opportunities to create another funny, exciting, and heartwarming adventure, and there were a few reports that I saw that suggested this movie was on pace to be as good, if not better, than the original. I think I would just be skeptical about why Mike and Sully would be okay with leaving Monsters Inc. without them for an undisclosed amount of time, even though I'm sure the energy crisis was mostly over by then. And I also would have loved to know more about what they would have been doing throughout most of the film in the human world. Monsters Inc. and Monsters University did a good job, in my opinion, of spending the right amount of time at the right time in the film in the human world. But if it was all in service of getting us to that soul-crushing ending, I think it could have been great. Getting the chance to see Mike and Sully learning about the human world only to discover that they would only get one more opportunity to see Boo would have been devastating, especially if the film was given enough time to be developed and animated in a way that allowed it to be fairly compared to the original. But of course, Lost in Scaradise never came to be. You see, in 2006, once Bob Iger became CEO of the Walt Disney Company and Disney announced they were purchasing Pixar, the sequel rights for Pixar's films were given back to the studio that made them. Circle 7 was then shut down, and all of the scripts, ideas, and projects that Circle 7 was working on were then thrown out. But of course, a sequel to Monsters, Inc. would inevitably rise due to the creative power of Disney television animation. Monsters at Work is arriving to Disney Plus on July 7th of 2021 and will continue the story of all of the monsters at Monsters, Inc. after Boo was returned to her room, but before Sully visits her again. And if you'd like to know more about the new characters we're going to meet, how the world is being developed, and of course, what Mike and Sully are going to be up to in the series, then check out my video in the description that breaks down what we know so far. Well, I wish this video was sponsored by Disney Plus. I'm just really excited about the show. Sure, I like the idea of a Monsters, Inc. sequel film, but I have to admit that after shows like Tangled the series, I'm pretty happy with the idea that we're going to get to spend a few hours over the course of a few weeks in the monster world. But fun people, let me know what your thoughts are about the canceled Monsters, Inc. 2 by commenting down below or chatting with me over on my Discord, which you can gain access to by joining our community over on Patreon. Also, make sure to subscribe for all of the Monsters at Work videos I'll be making soon. And finally, I hope you have a magical day.